Welcome back to the Iron Sights podcast. I've got a gentleman by the name of Carl Fisher here. Carl and I got First off, Carl, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. I'm honored to be here.
I appreciate you taking time out. This is a little bit of a different podcast for me and for you. This is your first one. You haven't done this before. You've got a very interesting story that was brought to my attention by a friend of both of ours. I think you're much closer. Kyle and I would say, are more acquaintances. But Kyle DeFore, who's been in the firearms instruction industry for a very, very long time. He is a legend who sat down with me almost, I feel like it's about a year and a half, almost two years ago now, to do an interview. It was one of the more popular interviews that we actually did. Put us together just about a week ago. And that's just coming off what people are going to find out in this story. This is kind of some of the first conversations you're actually having about it since going through this journey that you've just been on. And it's your story to tell. And my hope is that we can kind of take this story kind of one step at a time and give some people some perspective on a little bit about your background, obviously who you are, and then the steps in this thing, and then ultimately give them maybe a little bit of a different perspective and some awareness and some education on what's happening inside our state and federal prison system, because you have an intimate knowledge of that. And I think there's some pretty, I would just say, some pretty interesting things. Interesting is, I use in air quotes here, that people should be aware of as it relates to what's going on in the community, that community at large, both from the corrections department side of things, as well as those that are incarcerated. So Carl, I'm going to stop talking and I'm just going to hand it over to you. This is the same thing I tell all my guests, man. I give you an opportunity here to just kind of give us a little background, catch us up on who you are. Just have to be patient with me because I'll probably interrupt you to maybe get some clarification.
I'm relying on you for this. Trust me.
So anywhere you want to start and anywhere you want to finish is cool with me, man. Go for it.
Yeah. So like you said, my name's Carl Fisher. I grew up very middle class, very diverse neighborhoods here in Virginia Beach. Father was a Marine, so we traveled constantly. And then I joined the Army, became a Ranger. Shortly after, like 97, I got out of the military.
Okay.
And 9/11 hit. And right around 9/11, I started doing corporate security with a guy from Dev Group, SEAL Team 6. Did that for a couple of years, man, ran all over the world in G5s and, went to the Grammy Awards and, cool things like that. And then I started up at Blackwater, training Ambassador Bremer's detail on shooting and tactics. And right about that time, I saw some strange guys running around Blackwater area, and they were agency guys. And I became friends with them, developed a rapport with them. And right around 2004, they asked me if I'd be interested in coming on board with the agency. So I did that, put in my resume, interviewed, and I was hired as a firearms instructor at the farm. So I did that for a number of years, and I was satisfied. It was really cool, but I wanted to get into warfare. 9/11 just happened, and things are kicking all over the world, and I don't want to just be standing on a range. So I started deploying with a anti-terrorism force protection arm of the agency. Did that for a while. Afghanistan training, local guard force. Went to northern Iraq, Jalalabad coast, and then came back and I joined Counterterrorism Center, SMD, which our friend that we discussed, Rick Prado, was running at the time.
Okay.
So I started running around in the Special Mission Department for Counterterrorism Center. Did that for a number of years and a bunch of deployments around the world. And then I had an opportunity to jump in on OTC with a Special Mission Unit. So I did that, and that led to my assignment with Ground Branch and their counterterrorism pursuit teams. And I did 15 deployments to Afghanistan as a counterterrorism specialist. Yeah. Really good, great work.
Can you talk about that just to give people kind of just an overview of what that type of work is?
Yeah, well, it's chasing bad guys on, I would say, at the highest level. The unit, we would go after, guys on a national command level target list, and we'd go out there and get them or, do away with them.
Gotcha.
I did that for many of years. And then right around 2019, I transitioned, I have kids, and, I was missing them. My daughter has grown to a young lady. And I actually saw her one time and I was like, damn, baby, when did all this happen? She goes, wow. Dad, you've been gone for 8 years. I'm like, yeah. Ouch, right. Reality. So I went back to the training command at the farm and started teaching firearms. And the night of July 1st, 2nd of 2022, I was involved in a incident where I discharged my weapon. I was still a firearms instructor with the agency at the time. Was charged with malicious wounding and use of a firearm commission of a felony. And straight to jail I went. I spent a month in jail before I got out, the city jail. Then I was on pretrial monitoring for about a year. Urinalysis once a month. And, I have a TSSCI, or I used to. I've never been in drugs in my life. I've never been in trouble.
Can you explain what that is, a TSSCI?
It's just about top secret, special compartmentalized information security clearance with a full scope poly. So I had a lifestyle poly and a counter intel poly, and, passed both of them, no problems. Make sure you're not working for any foreign governments. Make sure you don't do drugs, lifestyle poly. You're not robbing banks. You're not doing these things.
Okay.
So that all went away immediately. I got sent in the county jail, city jail, spent a month there, which was to this day the worst experience I served in 3 different correction facilities, and that initial month of being incarcerated was tremendously difficult on me. Because all I've done my entire life is, do stuff on behalf of the U.S. and all of a sudden I'm behind bars in a situation that I thought ability, opportunity, intent, which is what I've been taught my entire life for self-defense, were met. And now it doesn't matter. Like I don't matter to anybody at this point. I'm locked up.
Man, we did have probably a 20, maybe 30-minute conversation where you just filled in a lot of gaps for me I didn't know from that conversation, but was more kind of about your experience after this situation. Can you maybe just elaborate a little bit on the circumstances of this situation and kind of how it came to be? Because I think that is we touched on kind of the overview there, but I think this is something that for a lot of the people and a lot of the audience that listens to this show, I think this is something that they need to know about or hear about, because it doesn't get talked a lot. I've had a lot of people on this show that are experts, subject matter experts in firearms, self-defense, offensive type of things, professionals that work years and years and years around firearms, something they're comfortable with, that are very responsible in every way possible, and try to teach that level of responsibility to the students that they have, whether they're working with some type of an agency, municipal, federal, whatever, or to civilians. And we have a right to protect ourselves in the United States. Our Constitution protects our right to defend ourselves and to have firearms. And this is one of those situations, from my understanding, and from just a little bit that I've told, that seems to meet all the reasonable things that you just kind of outlined there. So if you could just give us an overview of that, I probably have some questions there just to make sure that we're clear moving forward on kind of like what did the trial look like, and man, right, how did any of this even happen? Because that's the question I have. Like, what is this guy even doing here, talking to me about all this stuff after hearing about the initial part of this, and especially after hearing it from Kyle. Kyle's just like, man, this story is wild. It's really disturbing. So,
and he has insight knowledge on my trials. He was there. So, I got to be careful on what I say because there's civil suits on both sides.
Understood.
So I'll just sum it up quickly. I was trying to go to a bar with a young lady and got in an argument with a young lady, and the bouncer at the bar pulled a gun on me. And I was hands up. I was like, no issue. I got out of the car. I was walking away, and he kept following me through the parking lot, telling me he's going to shoot me. He was like, I'll do this. I'll do this. I will fucking do this. And at one point, I even stopped and I looked. I go, get your finger off the trigger while you follow me before you stumble and blow my head off.
Right.
His own witnesses even said he had a gun on me. So it got to a point where ability, opportunity, intent, does the guy have the ability to harm me? Well, yes, he does. He has a gun. Does he have the opportunity? I'm in close enough proximity where he doesn't have to be a good shot to hit me. If I'm 200 yards away, I could probably just get off the X and go somewhere else.
Copy.
And does he have the intent? He told me he was going to shoot me. So at this point, I draw my weapon, I step draw, and I hit him one time in the shoulder. And I get charged with malicious wounding, use of a firearm, and commission of a felony. I called the police. I got off the area, and I called the police and told them I was involved in the shooting. And I cleared my weapon out, safe and cleared my weapon, which was held against me in court, by the way, for doing that.
Wait,
yeah, I guess I was.
We'll come back to that. We'll come back.
Yeah, I guess I was trying to conceal something. You know what I mean? And to go to jail, it was July 4th weekend. So I spent the weekend in jail, and then I got denied bond. And come to find out, the judge just didn't want to be hassled with my case, and both attorneys agreed to that. And I'm like, this is my life we're talking about. I spent 30 days in jail in Chesapeake. I lost about 25 pounds in 30 days. From the stress, from the, eating. You eat breakfast at 2:30 in the morning. They come beating on your cell. Lunch comes at 8:30 in the morning, and dinner's at 3 p.m. And it's, a slice of bologna and a piece of bread. And that's about it. I lost 25 pounds in a month.
Okay, so hold on just a second here. So just with regard to a couple of things, you kind of outlined the situation. That's pretty wild. If somebody's pointing a gun at you, finger on trigger, telling you they're going to shoot you, I don't know how I would react. I'd like to think I'd know how to react, but what I'm hearing you say is you're trying to get out of there, and at some point that doesn't seem like it's gonna happen. And as you get further away from people and towards your own vehicle to get out of there, you make a decision. Okay, the next decision you make is to call the police. Right? Like, let's get law enforcement involved. This incident just happened.
Yeah, because I'm at this point, I'm absolutely convinced I did nothing wrong.
Correct. Got it.
The criteria for discharging your weapon and defending yourself, in my mind, and what I've been taught my entire life, had been met. Hey, this is what's going on. This is what I was involved in.
So you call the police, and you're off site at this point. And during that time, you're like, well, the police are going to come. Right. And I've got a firearm. I've already told them I've had a firearm, and I've already used it. So logically, and, again, this is just me. This is me outside of us talking on the phone for 30 minutes and me not knowing you otherwise, except for today. That seems like a smart thing for me to do. I safe and clear my weapon, and I make it. Did you make it visible? Like, what did this look like? When they showed up? Where were you? What did it look like? Was it a felony stop? What happened?
No. I was off site at a shopping center. I called them, clear and safe my weapon, put it in the bag of my motorcycle, slide lock to the rear, magazine out, clear and safe.
Got it.
And that actually, you bring up the point that logically it makes sense. Well, it makes sense to you and I. It doesn't make sense to the jury or the prosecutors. They made it that I was trying to hide something because I cleared and saved the weapon. They actually asked me at trial, well, why would you do that? I go, well, I didn't think it was a good idea to have a loaded firearm on me when the police showed up, when I was just involved in the shooting.
This makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah, to me too, man. But it just, everything I did to guys like you and I makes sense. But to a jury that was not my peers, by the way. Like that, there was nobody on there like you and I. And to the prosecutor, who would make every move I make seem like I was the guilty one immediately. And she was good at it.
I think part of the challenge is, and I've heard it's not a similar story, but another story about a person that had to go through a trial like this, and it was the contention was around the fact that the person touched the firearm. They never used it; it was handed to them, and they cleared and safed it. And the question that kept coming up was why did you do that? Why did you do that? And it was clear both to the attorneys, both to this person and about his own attorney, as well as everybody else that was in the courtroom, that they didn't, that had no experience around or had no training with firearms, that sounded weird. Like that was a weird thing for them. Like if you have a firearm, somebody else is about to touch it or come in contact with it or whatever. You're going to clear and safe. You're going to make sure that weapon is safe. This makes perfect logical sense for any responsible firearms owner or anybody who's ever even been around a firearm. I don't think anybody listening to this show or who has ever even been around firearms would argue with that statement. So I find that quite obviously concerning that, as you said, later it comes up as a problem. Like this is a problem that you did that. And I think the attorney says that you were trying to conceal some type of crime that you may have committed. You haven't been on trial yet. You're just simply trying to make the scene safe when other guys with guns that deal with other guys with guns with really poor intentions have to deal with all day long. Okay. So
and I think that's a learning point for people that carry firearms is like your level of training far exceeds what people can understand. And when we do something completely in the realm of safety, logic, other people don't understand that.
Well, what's curious to me is, a question I guess I would have is, like, how did the officers deal with that situation when they showed up, just in general? Were they
very, very professional. Okay. They were top-notch professional guys. I told them where the weapon was. I've safed and cleared it. They didn't, I'm a big supporter of law enforcement.
Yeah. Okay.
Always have been, always will be. I don't have an axe to grind with these guys. They were professional. They treated me well. I think they understood what I did.
Okay. So got that. So how did they handle that? Did you immediately go into handcuffs and get placed in the back of the unit? Okay.
Oh yeah. I got placed on the ground, handcuffed, got put in a car and was taken back to the scene.
To the scene.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. And, so that also makes, I don't know about back to the scene. I don't know how police investigations go and whatever. So I wouldn't even begin to think about that. But in this situation, it makes perfect sense to me that you would be handcuffed and placed in the back of a car and be detained, right? So that makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah, I have no issue with that whatsoever. I mean, like they're doing what they're supposed to do, and they were professional. I have no complaints about the on-scene officers. I mean, the investigation was something different that I have a lot of issues with.
Did you expect? So I'm going to ask you: did you expect that to happen when you called? Did you pretty much know it was going to happen?
No, I thought I was going to be taken to jail because they read me my rights.
That's what I was asking. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
They read me my rights and I'm like, okay, off to jail I go and then it will be cleared up. I mean, because obviously I had a right to defend myself.
Gotcha. Okay. So that's what I'm saying. Like you're like, this is no surprise I'm being taken to jail, but what happened after is where things get really wild, right?
Yeah, no doubt, man.
So you end up sitting in jail. Then when is like the pretrial where you were denied bond initially, but then ultimately you did get released for a period of time until the conviction. So how did that work out?
I did. Can I back up to what happened when I got checked into jail?
Yes, please.
So, again, I've never been in drugs in my life. I didn't get an alcohol charge, nothing. I wasn't drinking. Nothing was going on. And they put me to the nurse, bring me to the nurse, and the nurse puts me in drug detox. I've never done drugs in my life. I got a TSSCI clearance at this point. She puts me in drug detox and puts me on pills. I don't know what they are.
Wait, immediately upon arrival?
Oh, yeah. They put me in this cell with straight up crackhead heroin addicts that are literally detoxing.
So it's like a group cell.
Yeah, there's 4 of us in this cell. They're puking, using the bathroom all over the cells, and they're dope sick. And I'm there. And I don't know what's going on. I can't fathom why I'm in this cell. The nurse comes around, hands me some pills. I'm like, what am I taking? She's like, it's going to help you sleep. And I'm like, well, I damn sure could use that right now.
Okay.
I was taking this mess. I don't know what it is, and they could write anything they want on my records. I pretty much woke up a week and 2 days later. Yeah, I mean, I wasn't eating. I was out of it. I would get up, stumble around. One of the guys I was in the cell with, I'm still in contact with. He was like, "Yeah, dude, you were out of it." I have no idea what they put me on. Put me in drug detox. I don't understand it.
So they put you in drug detox and give you drugs. This make a lot of sense. And to this day, do you even know what that was?
I have no idea. And I didn't know how bad it was until I went for my bond hearing. My sister, family, everybody's in the courtroom, and it's through a Zoom. It's a Zoom trial.
Okay.
And my sister said my eyes were yellow. I was slurring my words, and she looked at one of my best friends, Kimmy, and goes, "There's something wrong with my brother. This isn't right. This isn't who he is." And I don't remember any of that. My sister tells me that. And I go back to my cell, and come to find out, I was denied bond. Apparently the judge just didn't want to deal with this case, which my attorney told me so. And I'm like, well, this is my life, and you decided you just don't want to be bothered with it. So it went up to the state level, and I eventually, a month later, have my second bond hearing, and I get bond $2,500. You know what I mean? Like, I'm out the door with a judge who wants to hear me. I have a state police officer testify for me. I've got a guy from Dev Group testify for me. My ex-wife testified for me. And at some point, the judge goes, "Hold up for a second. Who are you again? And who are you to him?" And she goes, "Well, I'm his ex-wife." And he goes, "And you're here testifying on his behalf?" She goes, "Yes, sir, I am." He goes, "Well, that speaks volumes on your character, because I don't see this."
That never happens.
So I get out, man.
Wait, so hold on, Carl, time out for me real quick. I want to understand something, because this is the way my head is working. You get drugged, basically.
No doubt.
Right? Okay. And the argument would be you did that willingly because you were under the understanding that it was just going to help you get some sleep in the situation, right, knowing you're going to be there for a few days, right? Yeah. And who wants to be, well, there probably could be some debate about this, but you're in a pretty gnarly situation. Okay.
Yes, no doubt.
So what my question is about the attorney process here. At what point do you get an attorney? Are you involved in that process, or are you showing up to this Zoom trial not knowing who your attorney is, or was this somebody that was just given to you by the state as like in a public defender? How did that process work? Because if you're out of it, I don't know how you can make any logical determinations about who should be representing you.
I didn't. My sister did it all. I mean, God bless her. She came down from Ohio. She hired an attorney, gave the retainer fee. I had a brief interview with him. Great guy. I have no issue with him. And then once my bond got denied, we went to another attorney, a little higher grade attorney.
Okay.
And it cost a fortune, but he got me out. And it was all my sister, because I don't remember my first hearing to this day. I don't know what happened to me. And, I know they can cover their ass with any type of documentation. Well, he did this, he did that. I don't remember.
You wouldn't have even known. Yeah, no. You wouldn't even.
And my sister literally said she saw me on the screen and was like, "There's something wrong with my brother. My brother doesn't babble. His eyes aren't yellow. What's going on with my brother?" And she's a registered nurse, by the way.
Okay. All right. So I'm just trying to keep all this in order here. So then flashing forward again. So you go to this bond hearing. You're denied bond. For whatever reasons. We know this happens in the justice system all the time. You're really at the mercy of whoever's sitting on the bench a lot of times. You then have to go back, right? And you're there for how much longer before the second hearing?
I spent a total of about 30 days.
And was that in the same place, like in the same jail? Okay.
Down here in Virginia.
And in that period of time, you didn't get the new attorney until bond had been set, or pre-bond?
No, pre-bond. My second bond hearing.
Okay. So when you got this person, did they feel like did you feel, I'm just curious about like your state of mind and kind of where your mindset was at this point after all the things that had happened. Obviously, you're going to have to be very cautious here and make some, now that you're of the right frame of mind, or at least sound mind, where you can actually know what's going on. you're awake. Did you feel like this person understood the circumstances and how they played out? And maybe, again, going back to this whole, which you probably don't find out till later, this whole understanding of safe firearm handling, self-defense, as you know, the rules that in the way those things play out here, or did you feel like they were having to get an education about this during your trial?
He was a very well-known attorney who's represented several guys from Dev Group. He knows the mindset that we have, but I still don't believe that he understood what transpires in your mind when you carry a firearm and you're in a use of force situation.
Got you.
But he was great. He was like, I don't even know why you're in here, is what he told me.
Okay.
Once he read everything, all the statements, and he got me out on bail and on bond. And like I said, I had a state trooper testify for me. I mean, like, I support law enforcement. I don't, I have I don't have an axe to grind with them.
I just wonder. So at this point, so you get out on bond. Again, you mentioned the judge's statements as it related back to your ex-wife and kind of being there. Did you have an opportunity to speak, or were you advised not to at this second hearing?
I did not speak.
Okay.
We had 4 people that came and testified on my character. Okay. And that was enough for the judge.
I just wanted to bring that up because, as the person that's, as the person that's involved here, you have to have other people speaking for you. And that's an important piece of this whole story, is how other people have their own things to say. And your life is literally in the hands of those people, and the importance of having those relationships, surrounding yourself with people that actually understand who you are, what you're about, but also the things that are involved in this particular incident. I wonder, during this time, were there people from the other side that were also in that courtroom or on that, that were saying different things?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't want to dig into the details, but obviously those people likely don't know you, right?
No, not at all. Like,
right?
Nobody knows, except for outside of a small community that, I ran with the agency. I was at top of the game. I'm a firearms instructor. You know what I mean? I know use of force. They don't know any of that. So
that's a whole other thing now. Now your life, which when you work for the agency, it runs fairly low profile, if I'm not mistaken, right? Okay. Now your whole life is going out there and it's being made public record.
Right.
And you have family and you have friends, and these friends are taking a risk or these people that are testifying are taking a risk by putting themselves in the public eye or public view. As it relates to anybody maybe on the other side that has ill intentions, and I don't mean from a violence perspective. Certainly that could be a risk, but I mean from like a disparagement type of perspective that would take any opportunity to tell lies or make up stories or just dox people.
It was everywhere on social media. I was beating a woman. I stabbed somebody. I shot up a bar because I got beat up inside the bar. I never even went into the bar. My daughter's exposed to all this stuff because at the time she's 16. It was damaging for sure,
And you haven't even been convicted yet. You're just being held, right? You're not even guilty yet, but are in the court of public opinion, and the way media works, it doesn't seem like it really matters. Right. I think that's something people can relate to, but it's a very real consequence of you defending yourself, and that's kind of what I meant at the beginning or the top of the hour here, just with like making people aware, like these are the things that will happen to you. It's not an if. It's a will.
Oh man, it was everywhere. And the thing is, I personally don't know the gentleman that I was involved with, but he has family, he has friends, and they're going to run to his defense.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like, and I understand that, but I did not expect blatant lies. On social media. I'm not saying anything from him. Social media. Like I stabbed a girl. I shot up a bar. I mean, like it was so wild that it caught me by surprise. Like, you would say blatant lies on social media about a guy in a situation you know nothing about.
Yeah. I think I think people can relate to that. It's, you know, man. Okay. So I didn't want to belabor any of that. I just wanted to kind of understand the totality of circumstances as we move forward. So all of that is spinning. But at some point, you are awarded bond for only $2,500, which is very little for somebody that's being, in my mind, that if you're being treated like a criminal, right? And with this malicious intent, I forget what the exact charge was you said, that this malicious intent to hurt someone, that $2,500 is only bond. So I think that kind of speaks to me. That's kind of a weird contradiction to me.
Well, I think and my attorney brought it up, the first judge just didn't want to deal with this.
Just like that. That's it.
Yeah, just like that. That's my life. I'm like, my life means nothing to these people. And that was a big shocker. Man, your life means nothing in the judicial and in the prison systems. Nobody could give a shit less what you've done. And that was very obvious to me. The second judge, he was more familiar with the area and the people that operate around. And he listened to the people that testified on my behalf. And he was like, I'm convinced you're not leaving. And it wasn't trying, you know, at your bond, it's not trying the hearing. It's not the charges. It's, hey, does this guy pose a threat to society?
Correct. Yeah.
I've carried a weapon concealed around the world and never had an issue. You know what I mean? I'm a good citizen and I'm not going to leave. I'm not running from this. You know what I mean? So
you've done nothing wrong in your mind, right? Yeah.
In my mind, nothing wrong whatsoever. And so he granted it. And my family was in the courtroom. And right away, they put the money up. And actually, the jail held me till midnight that day. I was done at, I think, 1:30 in the afternoon. And they sent me back to the pod and held me till like 11:59. And my sister was out front. Yeah, was out front waiting for me.
Yeah, we'll never have answers to reasons for that kind of stuff. But
I guess the learning point is don't think that what you've done in the past matters at all. I mean, like, I was top of the game. I mean, I was a firearms instructor. You know, it didn't matter. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter at all.
Yeah, I imagine that could be looked at two different ways too, depending on what side of this you're coming from.
That's right.
Okay, so you get out. So how's it coming home for that amount of time?
I was.
I imagine you're exhausted. I imagine you're exhausted.
I was exhausted. I was sick. I had a seizure inside of a grocery store with my son, special needs son. I'd been taking off any medication whatsoever from the VA, mental health meds. I've been diagnosed with traumatic brain injuries from warfare. And in jail, they stripped me off all that. And my sister came to them and was like, you can't do this. You can't just take a guy off his meds. Like, well, it's not our doctor, so it doesn't matter. And, you know, that the result of that was a seizure inside of a grocery store with my special needs son. I mean, I fell out. I lost 20, 25 pounds in a month, taking off all meds, and I end up in the emergency room.
So a whole other thing, man, just in terms of how we're treating our veterans, but I had such a rough time with this. Like, they're giving you stuff that puts you to sleep for, you know, a week and makes you incoherent. Yet the things that you've needed that have kept you level for whatever that means for whoever the person is has been stripped away, and there's just no care whatsoever at that point. It's just gone.
Whatsoever. I actually had a correction officer tell me, "Well, your dumbass joined the military." I'm like,
yes.
Okay. And that's what I've never been a big PTSD guy. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not boo-hooing because I used my weapon in Afghanistan and Iraq. That's what I went there to do. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I enjoyed fighting. That's what I was there to do. But it didn't really hit me that PTSD was this real until I was in jail. They used to bang the bars, they call it. So there's portions of the city jail that are still bars. And the guys would take the bars and just bang them relentlessly. And it was so loud. And inside my head, man, one incident in particular kept replaying in my mind. And at some point I would just lay down and put the covers over my head. And I'm like, I can't get this flashback. And it just kept going. Same incident over and over again. And it hurt me, man. I mean, mentally it hurt.
So when you came out, Were you able to receive those benefits again from the VA?
Yeah, but what my organization deals with, and I'd love to plug their name, Third Option
Please do.
Foundation.
Oh, sorry, one more time.
Third Option Foundation.
Okay, yes.
They deal with paramilitary guys from the agency, and they sent me directly to Boston for a week, to Boston General and Harvard Med, and they took a look at my entire body and just like, yeah, man, you're wrecked, you know. And so I have all the documentation of what that month caused me, and it was a big mental blow, is what it was, man. Like, you know, it was like a constant gunfight in my head, and it didn't end because it was so loud and so chaotic in there.
So as you go home and you're trying to get yourself straightened out here, what's going on the trial side of things as you're prepping for whenever your next court date is? And had that been set, or were you waiting to have that set after the bond?
It was waiting for it to be set. Part of my release was I was put on pretrial monitoring, which I've never even heard of. You know,
what does that mean?
Well, it's almost like being on probation. I go into a probation office twice a month, and I'm subject to urinalysis, and I got to check in and do I have a stable home? And I did that for a year and a half.
Okay, so it's 18 months. Yeah. And I mean, are you allowed to leave? Obviously, at this point, your clearances are gone. You're not employed.
No, not at all.
So financial hardships are inevitable here.
Tremendous. Like my life, all I've done my adult life is military, agency, Blackwater stuff, and all of a sudden I can't have a firearm. I don't have anything. I have no skills. You were collecting a government paycheck who has now since written you off. Right. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. All right. So we're getting through. So then there's this. So what are you doing for 18 months, man? Like, what's going on?
Man, I'm constant meetings with attorneys. Third Option Foundation is helping me out tremendously. I'm looking for work wherever I can. And, I'm doing concrete work. I'm helping trim trees. I'm in an abyss. Like, I don't know, like, how did I get here? And all of a sudden, I don't have income. I'm 100% disabled with a VA from the TBIs and, PTSD. So I had that coming in, but that stopped once I got to prison because you can't be incarcerated more than 60 days and still have your benefits. So
okay.
I don't know why that is. What does that have to do with my service, But
okay.
Yeah, it was rough, man. I was just prepping myself. I got a trial date of July 23. That was a year afterwards. And
by the way,
yes.
I'm just going to make this point. You've been convicted of nothing yet.
Nothing.
Your life has been completely turned upside down. Again, Absolutely. Just going back to the financial stuff. I mean, trimming trees, doing concrete work, trying to find some level of employment that's going to help you pay your bills. Right. I mean, you went into this with a lifestyle and bills, right? Just like the rest of us. And when those things aren't getting met, obviously that creates a whole another level of stress at a ton of different ways. Probably often means leaning on people to help out, which you probably never had to do before. It sounds like you got a pretty supportive family and a group of friends there, but that is a burden that exists that now is being not forced on other people, but other people are coming to aid in order to help you with. And for a guy that has done the things that you've done, who's always been the problem solver, the solution finder, the giver, the provider. I, as a human, as a dad, as a business owner, as just a dude. I can't imagine the level of stress that would cause. I mean, I've had my own challenges up and down in life with all kinds of things. So I think I can relate a little bit, but that's somewhat unimaginable to me, man.
Luckily, while I was incarcerated for that 1 month, some friends of mine started a GoFundMe page, which later in court, I was told it was a lie and I was ripping people off, by the way. I had nothing to do with it. They raised like $14,000, which went directly to my attorney. So everything I did was scrutinized by the prosecutor when I went in. And I had nothing to do with the GoFundMe page. Every penny went to my attorney. That didn't even touch my attorney's fees. You know what I mean? It was good to have.
I've had attorney fees in my life, and they're debilitating. They're 100% debilitating, and it's awful. It's a racket. I don't think there's another business in the world, quite frankly, and I'm not bad mouthing attorneys, but I don't think there's another business in the world that can bill that way, and where you feel so stuck between a rock and a hard place, in that sense. Okay, so eventually this trial happens, right? Where you get you probably have to go through a couple court dates. Finally, the trial begins. Can you walk us through that a little bit?
Sure. My attorney and I elected for a jury trial. It was a 3-day trial. I was skeptical about the jury trial because I thought my case was so clear cut. And why don't we just present it to the judge? And hey, I get it. Self-defense, you're good to go.
Yeah, what's the strategy there, not in doing it that way versus a non-jury?
That you have more people that may look at it from different perspectives instead of one person.
Okay.
So I agreed to it. We went to jury trial. The jury selection was terrifying.
For people that don't understand, this gets done by the defense attorney.
Say again?
For people that don't understand, this gets done by the defense attorney.
Defense and the prosecutor.
Mm-hmm.
So they interviewed, I think, 25 people. They marched them out into the courtroom, and I'm sitting there. And you can strike so many people from the prosecution side and from my attorney, the defense side. And any white male with a bald head and tattoos and beard was struck immediately.
No go.
Absolutely.
No go.
Absolutely. And my attorney got to strike his people as well. And I would look at the jury and go, this isn't going to be good. Like, this is bad. Because, there's young kids that, probably think anybody with a gun is bad. I mean, it's a good, diverse bunch of people, thankfully.
I think that's a fair statement, though. Like, just these people are likely, who I'm looking at is likely very out of touch with the things that exist on this planet, in our country, on the streets of America, and how any of this kind of works with regard to society and social contract.
Yeah, I mean, it was the scariest part of the trial was like, oh, geez, here we go. I mean, young 20-year-old kids that, live on video games and social media, and,
Can't imagine.
In the 50s, and they're looking at me like, who's this old racist?
You're an alien. Yep.
Who's this guy?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we went to jury trial, 3 days of testimony.
Did you take the stand?
Absolutely.
Okay, got it. So you did. So you had a voice at some point.
Right. I had great witnesses also that came up and testified to my training, my experience. The prosecutor and, a state police officer told me this, who testified for me. He was like, you have to be ready for the prosecutor. They will lie about anything. I'm like, they can't lie. He's like, oh, yeah, they can. You're under oath. They are not. And that was shocking. Like, here we go. And everything I did was held against me, from clear and safe my weapon to it was impossible for me to identify that this guy had his finger on the trigger. And as a firearms instructor, that's what you look at immediately. I mean, I don't even have to think about that. Like, yes, he had his finger on it. How could you know that? Love, you expect us to believe that you saw that? I'm like, absolutely. Or immediately, I knew he had his finger on the trigger. My time in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria was held against me. They were like, well, you don't know the difference between Afghanistan, Iraq, and Chesapeake, Virginia, which nothing could be further from the truth. It was, they tried to say I was drinking. I had no charges. The police didn't smell an ounce of alcohol in my breath because there was none. There was video evidence of the actual situation that the police lost custody of.
Oh, wait, stop right here. So
100%.
There's videotape of this whole thing, and it somehow miraculously disappears.
That is correct.
Stunning.
That is correct. Yeah, I mean that's open in the court, man. We just lost control of it. We don't know where it's at. So there goes anything I have to say. And I got to be careful what I say. I will say the owners of the bar were very connected in the city, and it went away from me. Like I don't debate what I did. I don't deny it. I can't, nor would I. But there was so much that went on in that trial that was so I'm just going to say corrupt.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So ultimately, after 3 days, the jury goes in and decides my fate. And they met for about 3 hours.
Okay.
And I'm out front waiting with my family and the attorney just sitting there waiting. Finally, the bailiffs come out and say, hey, verdict's been met. Come on in. And I'm like, oh, God.
So while you're sitting there and you're waiting, you kind of already talked about the jury and you've heard all these lies. And, initially when you go in, you're like, okay, I got to go to jail for this. I get that, but this should be pretty clear cut. I mean, if there's video evidence, I've done the right thing, cleared and saved my weapon, right? I went to jail. I didn't put up a fight. I called the police. Yeah. I'm a responsible,
carrying legally, by the way.
A member of the, employee of the government that does a very, very specific job. Nobody else got hurt. I'm cooperative. I'm doing my thing. All of these things. But now you're in this situation where it's like, you got the jury that's not looking too good. You're hearing these lies in court. Things are getting twisted and turned. Absolutely. Video evidence quote unquote disappears. It's lost. Things are not stacked in your favor here, man. What is going through your mind while you're in this 3-hour waiting period? Is this a coin toss? Do you kind of know? I mean, what? Tell me.
So I was facing 10 to 15 years.
Wow.
And I'm thinking, I have kids. I got young kids. If I get 10 to 15 years, what am I going to do? You know what I mean? Like knowing in my head that I did the right thing and I'm maybe facing 10 to 15 years is something I don't know. Fathom. Yeah. I cannot fathom whatsoever. The girl that I was with that night that supposedly I was beating up, she got arrested for lying to the police. And even the police said she didn't have a mark on her face, anything like that. So I'm processing all this. The jury's heard that, I did this, I did that. Despite the police saying, well, she was arrested for lying to police. She doesn't have a mark on her body. I'm a boxer. I've been in martial arts my whole life. But the jury heard that a woman got hurt. Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter what was proven. It's what's lingering in the jury's mind. And the prosecutor was very good at it. You know what I mean? Very good. She even said, well, the reason she doesn't have a mark on her is, like when you bump your shin at night, when you wake up and go to the bathroom, get some drink, you don't see a bruise till the next day. That's what happened here. And I'm like,
wow,
I'm a 200-pound man. You know what I mean? Like, not the toughest guy in the world, but, if I'm going to be beating on a woman, I don't take any pride in this. There would be marks, right. And there was, so she was arrested anyways. So I'm thinking of all these things in my head, like, okay, what are they thinking? What's going on? And just sitting there, like, am I going home? What's going to happen here? And finally, verdict comes, and I go in the courtroom, and I was found not guilty on malicious wounding. I was found not guilty on use of a firearm and commission of a felony. And it was so obvious that like I said, it was not a trial, a jury of my peers. These are people that have nothing in common with me, and they're like, yeah. That didn't happen. I mean, there's no malicious intent. That got found not guilty. So I was like, thank goodness. And then they found me discharging a firearm in public, which I did, and unlawful wounding or injury. I'm not sure the exact term. So both of these are 0 to 3 months guidelines for sentencing. I've already done a month in jail. Okay. So I'm feeling good. We walk out. I go home and, just take a couple deep breaths and wait for the trial, for the sentencing to be set. The sentencing was set December of 23. So that was the next big milestone. Okay.
So while you're sitting, you're expecting a 0 to 3 months, again, on top of time served, right, or against, I guess I would say time served for the time that you've already spent. Is this what your attorney's telling you at this time too?
Actually, we didn't get sentenced that day. That was July. Right. We come back, and my attorney tells me, he goes, I expect you're going home today. The guidelines are 0 to 3 months. You've already done a month. You're government work. You're a good citizen. You've never gone to jail. You've never been incarcerated. He goes, I see us going home today. I'm like, great. And we went into for sentencing, and I knew I was in trouble when the judge says, I'm going outside of the guidelines on this.
Wow.
And I was like, uh-oh. He was like 18 months incarceration, Department of Corrections. And I was led out of the courtroom then and there, and my journey began.
Shocked, I'm sure.
Dumbfounded. Like, I cannot believe what's going on. My family's there, everybody's there, and they're just like,
not prepared for this.
Right. And then, I made sure I didn't show emotions. It was big boy time. You know what I mean? Like,
I got you.
There's nothing you can do at this point.
Mm-hmm.
18 months Department of Corrections, which means I'm going to prison. I'm not going to stay in a city jail for too much longer. And off I go, So
this is a felonious charge.
Yes.
Yeah. So you're going to prison. You're going to the West Virginia state or federal prison system?
Well, I go to Nottoway prison in Virginia.
Okay.
Yep.
Obviously.
That was the first place. And then I go to St. Bride's.
So we're stepping up the level of what you'd already been through for that first month.
Absolutely.
And I think this is where things get really wild in terms of the exposures that you had and the things that you discovered when you were there. I mean, I heard what you said there about, trying like, okay, this is the decision. I need to switch over to being prepared for what I'm about to go through. You're a dude that's been through a lot of things, seen probably a lot of things that people can't even imagine. You already described how some of those things have impacted you in your life. And now you're walking into another situation where you may need to be prepared for, obviously, the worst.
And it happens.
And because that's where you're going. Now, I haven't had a lot of time, but I did do a little research on the system that you went into. And like this is not isolated to the state that you're in. However, there's not a lot of good things out there about what the conditions of that system looks like. And it's not new. This is not something that has been just newly discovered. Right. It's been a very neglected. This is not me saying this. This is what I'm reading sort of on both sides of the media. People that are trying to be pro Department of Corrections there to try and make change maybe for the positive. Whatever their intentions are, I don't really know. This is just what I've been able to gather. And then there's the other side of it where people are like, no, this thing is a total mess. It has been. There's corruption. There's the rate of death there is like 50% higher than it is in any other prison in the United States, any other prison system in the United States. This is not a good situation, Carl.
No.
Did you have any clue or any idea going in what you might be getting into?
Not at all. I was prepared for the violence. I knew that was going to happen. What I was not prepared for were the drugs. Drugs like I've never done drugs in my life. I've never seen so many drugs as inside the correction systems. The corruption, the gang members, violence for violence. You know what I mean? Like I perpetrate violence on behalf of the United States and had no issue with it whatsoever. But just violence for violence, I don't. You know what I mean? With no cause, no conscious decisions, just violence, drugs, prostitution was big. It was Nottoway was a mess.
Okay, so I think people just listening. There are some people that understand what an asocial predator is. And so when you talk about violence for the sake of violence, with no regard for human life, including their own, there's probably a lot of there's a lot that goes into this, and they most of the time, and again, you're painting a very clear picture of how it happens the other part of the time, whatever the percentage of that is. But most of the time, people that are in prison are supposed to be there. They should be there.
No doubt. No doubt. I'm not. And, I think I need to make it clear that, I'm coming forward with this not for a pity party on me, not for saying that, do away with the prison systems. Unfortunately, I don't have an answer for or a recommendation for what I experienced. and hopefully somebody far smarter and intelligent than I hears this interview and goes, all right, there's something needs to be done. Because this should not be going on in the United States. It's insanity. It's lawless, just something I wasn't ready for.
Well, let's start. And again, I talked to you off air about this, and my goal is never to sensationalize anything, but I think that bringing an acute awareness for people that maybe think they know but don't really know, me included, on a couple of things, I think is maybe what we can walk through here, if you'll oblige me on this. And so let's talk about the violence. Let's start with the violence piece. So when you say that for violence for the sake of violence, what can you tell us there?
Like I experienced a guy. They call it the boulevard. It's the concrete that runs all around the facility. It's known as a boulevard at Nottoway, St. Bride's, where I was at also. There was a guy who just ran out and just started punching people. I mean, like knocking them out on the boulevard for no reason. People stabbed in the stairwell.
Indiscriminately?
Yeah. I mean, just gang initiations inside there. And that's what they do, man. If you're marked, I don't care how tough you think you are. Very seldom was there a one-on-one fight. You're not going to have a one-on-one fight with a gang member. It's not going to happen. They will jump you and they'll have no remorse about it. You're going to be fighting 3 guys, and they're very aggressive. Not that they could fight that well, but the numbers that they had. We have to talk about race. We talk about prison. Yep. It's a very, very touchy subject, and I'm trying not. I don't want to offend anybody. My ex-wife's from Pakistan. My kids are mixed race. Mm-hmm. In prison, the prisons I was in, the blacks ran the prisons hands down.
Okay.
Just by sheer numbers. Numbers is everything in prison. And they were organized. They had 2 major gangs, Bloods and Crips. Mm-hmm. And they were everywhere. I mean, everywhere. They were dominant. And they did their business, man. Make no mistakes about it. We had Latino population that they were so good at doing time. It was the way they maneuvered was perfect for their community. And then you had the whites. Unfortunately, most of the whites were very passive, terrified out of their mind. Would not stand up for themselves most of the time, and it was bad.
So where does that leave somebody like you, man? I mean, how do you? I mean, especially with. It's not a secret. Like when you get there, like people are going to want to know who you are. They're going to start finding out who you are. Obviously, you're from the world of quote unquote law enforcement. If you want to look at it that way, like how are you received? How do you survive in this kind of a situation? What do you do? What does somebody like you do?
I tell you, man, I didn't tell anybody about my background with the agency, anything like that, because nobody would believe me. You know what I mean? No, that's
okay. Good point.
You know what I mean? Like, no, you're not.
You are, man. Sure you are.
Right, exactly. So I was fine with that, man. I tell you, right away, everybody thought I was part of AB.
Okay. So just can you explain the Aryan Brotherhood, right? Which
is very good, very not good, very well known in the prison systems. Which I am not, but I'm bald and have tattoos right away. I mean, like, this guy's AB. And many people would ask me, hey, man, are you part of AB? And I'm like, no, not at all. You know what I mean? Like, I'm a citizen of the United States who defended America, and I support law enforcement. You know what I mean? Like, nothing could be further from the truth.
Right.
So that right away, I'm a decent sized guy. So it helped. I did get tested in Nottoway. I got in a fight in Nottoway. And, I was just like, oh, God, I'm going to catch charges, and now I'm going to have more time.
Right.
That was going through my mind.
Yeah, which is a reality. Like, you're going for one thing, and then gotcha.
Luckily, it was another white guy who wanted to make a name for himself. We're in a very crowded environment, and he challenged me to go in his cell and flat out, in front of everybody, said he was going to kick my ass. And, I'm like, well, when are you going to do this? He was like, now. I'm like, where? He was in my cell. Let's go. I'm like, okay. You know what I mean? Like, you could either back down at that point, or you're going inside this cell. And
there's consequences to both. There are consequences.
There are, man. I tell you. And, I take no great, credit and, I got into a fight. I mean, I didn't want to. You know what I mean? Like, I'm trying to do my time and get out of there. But when you're challenged publicly in the prison system, it doesn't matter if you win the fight or not. It matters that you fight. Mm-hmm. And that's because everybody's watching. Mm. And from right there, they're going to know, don't mess with this guy or this guy's a punk.
It's very medieval. It's very
medieval.
It
is, man. So I made a decision to go in the cell, and I learned a lot about cell fights, man. I've been in jiu-jitsu and boxing and Thai boxing my whole life, but fighting inside of a cell is different. You're going to get hurt. Mm-hmm. Everything's bolted down. Mm-hmm. You fall into a shelf, that shelf's not going anywhere. Like, I had a cut on the back of my head. We fell into the bunks. The bunks aren't going anywhere. The guy reached up and was scratching my face. He was grabbing my groin. I won the confrontation easily. But I was bloody. Mm-hmm. It's different, man. And I hear all these combative stories, and I've been involved in combatives my whole life. It's different inside of a cell. I guess don't go to prison. It's the story. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's the moral of the story.
You're going to get hurt, and even if you win, you're going to get hurt. You can't fall into anything. You fall into a table, I don't know, in a bar fight. The table goes flying and everything's okay. You fall into a shelf or a bed in prison, it doesn't move. It's metal, and you're going to get hurt. So, I made my decision. I don't know if it was the right one or not, but that's what I did.
Look, man, I don't think that anybody's in a position to say whether that's right or wrong until you're in that situation. So there's no judgments on my behalf. I think, most people that I think understand the realities of the world we live in, would understand exactly why you did what you did. But I also understand there's probably a large population of people that, just walk away from the other cheek kind of thing. But don't understand the consequences of doing that, because that all you're doing is saying no for now. That's all you're saying, because it's coming to you next. Yeah.
There are consequences for everything you do in prison, from the way you carry yourself to the way you respond, who you hang out with. You're being watched the entire time by predators that want to take advantage of you. And if they get the opportunity, they will.
Yeah. And you're not affiliated with a big group, like you mentioned before, or watch your back or whatever, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Right. And that's where I first ran into corruption as well.
Yeah. So that's exactly, it's a great transition. So I want to talk about the drugs and the corruption, because they obviously overlap in a lot of ways. So let's talk about it. You can start wherever you want with that, man.
So the first time I realized, I go into prison, and I think it's going to be a very military type environment. You know what I mean? Do this, don't say this, don't, you know what I mean? I'm walking on the boulevard in Nottoway to go to the chow hall, and I see a group of young men standing around cheering on something. I don't know if there's a fight or what. So I walk around it, and as I walk around, I look, and there's a correction officer, female, twerking on the boulevard. And I'm like, hold up, are we in prison? Like, what is going on? And this is acceptable? And afterwards, one of the guys, who was a gang member, goes, I won't use his language because it's very offensive, unless, that's something you want your audience to know.
Whatever you want to say, there's no rules here, man.
Yeah, man, this is their language, not mine. He was like, nigga, this shit is like the hood. He was like, we got bitches, drugs, and my homies. I never want to leave. And I'm
End quote.
And I'm like, so that first word, the N word, is used. I hope I never hear it again. You can't have a conversation without hearing that word.
Yeah.
And so
it's culture. It's just the culture. Yeah. It is what it is. It's
recreated the environment they come from, and it's not a black thing. The whites do the same thing. I mean, like there was I think 5 guys from the same mountain neighborhood in West Virginia when I was there, and they were druggies and they were gang members, and they just recreated the environment they came from. It was insanity.
Yeah, but what you just said there is that the corrections officers are not only allowing this, but and to what level can they control it? But when you start contributing to it, that's a whole different
You're
deal.
enabling this whole just corrupt, bad environment, but you're in charge of it. like I'm not sure how to get the point across that everything that happened in there. And I'll give you another example. And, the Department of Corrections can go, that doesn't happen. We have a policy on this. We have a policy on that. And they have, just boatloads of manuals and SOPs. So I understand that. And not all corrections officers are like that. Like I saw one of your podcasts had a correction officer on there. Mm-hmm. I mean, like he's beyond reproach, and that's admirable. But that wasn't not what everybody. I experienced. Yeah, not at all. There's another
in that culture. Yep.
Right, man. Like one of the guards there was an active gang member. And somebody, people can go, how do you know that? Well, because they're gang signing each other, and he's letting his set get away with everything. On commissary day, commissary is when you buy extra food because you don't get enough food in prison. Not the ones I was in. He would be in the booth controlling 2 pods. He would open up the opposing pod, and I saw this with my own eyes. He would let his gang members come in and rob the white guys at Blade Point, take their groceries. He'd hit the button and let them back out and close the door back up. And I'm like, what did I just witness?
Yeah.
They're not even from this pod, and he lets his homies in there to rob the white guys of the groceries. And I'm like, anything can happen to me inside this prison.
Yep.
And there will be justification, and they can cover anything up.
You mentioned the drug use, and that you'd never seen any more drugs and learn more about drugs inside the prison system than you could have ever imagined, even outside. Can you talk about that a little bit? Sure,
man. So I spent a month or 2 at Nottoway. It was a transition point before you go to other prisons. It was a level 3, 4. So we're in cells, and people would start smoking, and I didn't know what they were smoking. I literally had to ask somebody. Well, they're smoking K2. I'm like, what is K2? And it's a chemical compound coming from cannabis that's kind of moved around, and it just makes you high and hallucinate. But they also smoke what was called man down. And I'm like, I don't know any of this.
Educate me. I have no idea what that is.
Yeah. Man down, and they smoke it constantly. It's roach spray and paint thinner on a sheet of paper from the woodworking shop. And they cut it up into stamps and they sell it. And these guys smoke that nonstop. So you have, on top of being in the pod with hardened criminals that have done years and years, now they're all high. And they're losing track of reality. They're screaming, hollering all the time. It's just a mess.
So talk to me about this. Like, I mean, you wouldn't possibly know, but I'm just going to ask you to make a guess just in terms of the propensity of drug use in a place like that. What percentage of the population do you think is using some type of controlled substance, if you want?
So I did this when I was transferred to St. Bride's. So I left Nottoway, went to St. Bride's, and St. Bride's was worse. I was in a pod with about 100 guys. And one day I took account of how many guys do not do drugs, including myself, 3 guys.
Oh, so you actually did this.
I actually did this. I'm stuck in a pod with 100 criminals.
Okay.
I went around and I looked. I'm like, because they smoke it from the morning. I mean, it's just not K2. It's just not man down. Meth was huge in there.
How are they getting it? How are they getting all that stuff?
Correction officers. And I know this to be true. I know this to be true. And everybody knows it. And, I'm not calling out the inmates, the convicts, because that's who they are. Mm. But enabling this type of behavior, and I'm talking about guys have died from drugs inside prison. It was not uncommon for count time, 6 o'clock in the morning, you stand by your bunk, and you hear on the radio, hey, we need a stretcher in 340. Somebody fell out. I need a wheelchair in 320. Because the guys are so blasted on drugs, and it's brought in by the correction officers.
Yeah, they're complicit.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're enabling this whole just harmful environment that these guys are doing more harm to themselves, but they think it's normal because they come from a drug addict environment. But at a given time, a correction officer may decide that, okay, press charges on this guy for working out in the pod. Yeah, it was just bizarre behavior. And Suboxone was a big one. Suboxone is what's used to come off of heroin. Mm. Well, they're strips. They're just called strips in prison. And there's guys that would have like 500 strips
to sell.
Oh, yeah. Sell. Oh, yeah. So people are like, well, how did they get money? Well, in prison, commissary, groceries money, phone times money, and then Cash App. So on the outside, they'll call their people who have Cash App and say, hey, Cash App, this address, $25. So the guy dealing drugs gets $25 on his girlfriend's Cash App.
It's like Uber Eats.
Yeah. And what they do, and it just blew my mind, is they get these strips, they cut them up and like a nail size, thumbnail, maybe smaller. They'll put it in their eye. It's called eye shots. So they'll sit back and they'll take this strip of Suboxone and they'll put it on their eye. And then you just see them, the heroin nods start and they go out. And you're like, how? At first it took me like, how are the correction officers not seeing this? Like you're walking through the pod and there's people passed out. There's puke all over the place. There's people freaking out. And then the more I watched, I knew when the drugs were going to be re-upped by what correction officer was working on what day. I knew when the pod ran dry. And then all of a sudden it's loaded up again on this night, on this person's night. I'm like, okay, I get it. You know what I mean? Battery shots, K2, same thing. They cut them up into small little squares, get a piece of Brillo pad, double end the wire over the battery and hit it with a stem and smoke it. Meth was everywhere. Yeah.
So
I know, right? How do you wrap your head around this?
I mean, I think I can. The only reason I'm chuckling is there's no consequence for selling it. There's no consequence for doing it. The ultimate consequence, obviously, is somebody dying because they've overdosed on it and whatever else they're doing internally to themselves, psychologically to themselves, by using the drugs. And then ultimately, what it does in terms of to mind state, with going all the way back to the violence piece and escalating that to a level that it clearly doesn't need to be anyways, because people are going to do that stuff as it is. So obviously there's levels to everything, and certain people handle things differently than other people. But the fact that, and again, the stories that you're telling me, you're giving detail that obviously I didn't get from some of the research that I did. However, the corruption that exists there specifically, and again, this is not isolated to the places you were. This is fact. This is going to happen everywhere. Probably some places more than others, and apparently in Virginia or West Virginia, not good. Real bad. Yeah. On the scale, on the larger scale. But when you're contributing to this stuff, so whether it's an overdose death, whether it's prolonged addiction, whether it's violence as a result of somebody being out of their mind and committing that on someone else or having it committed to them, and ultimately death, murder, that's happening in these cases, there's a common link.
Yes.
There's a common link, and there's zero consequences for this apparently. And if there are, I couldn't find any on it. Occasionally you'll get somebody that'll get busted, but to me, they seem like a pawn in the bigger scheme. It's like you're knocking out a low level person that really doesn't, that they're the scapegoat. It makes the story go away. And what does that really mean? They just get moved to a different prison, or they get moved to a different part of the prison, and so we just don't hear from them anymore. And we think that the problem's been taken care of, but really it's just been perpetuated by placing.
Yeah, man, it's one person gets sacrificed. Oh, we caught him with strips. Okay, he goes to the hole. Well, and I'm like I said, I'm not snitching on anybody. The pod it's an open air drug market.
Yeah.
I mean, there's 6 other dealers in the pod. So I get transferred from Nottoway and go to St. Bride's. Walking on the boulevard, a guy looks at me and goes, the only thing that sucks about this place? I'm like, what's that? He was like, the drugs are expensive. And I go, that's the only thing that sucks about this place to you is the fucking drugs are expensive. That's it. I'm in misery because I'm in a cage, you know what I mean? But to him, that's the only thing that was wrong with this place. Drugs are expensive. I'm like, where am I?
Yeah. I think that's that is the larger perspective I'd like people to maybe get from this. And that's what I've gotten from not just talking to you. I've talked to several other people that work on both sides or have been on both sides of this as well. I've actually a good friend who's been in the California Department of Corrections for a very long time, hasn't been on the show for the record, and probably won't be. But the point of that being, this is the thing he's trying to fight and bring exposure to on a regular basis. He's one of the good guys, if you will, that works in a really terrible environment, but also recognizes the contributions that the state and state employees are making to that environment. And I want to make that point because there are good people trying to do the right thing. Absolutely. But it's just like in any other situation, like you were doing, you were trying to do the right thing to defend yourself, and look where it got you. So if you're on the inside of that system from the officer, the correction officer side of things, like if I say something, if I do something, what are the risks to me for doing that? Being, do I get hit on the boulevard when I'm out doing my thing, doing my job? Do I lose my job? Does something happen to my family? Whatever the cases are. So it's like you're in a prison as a corrections officer, but you're kind of a prisoner within that system. And I'm not victim blaming. I'm not doing any of that. I'm just saying, like, it is a thing. It is a very stark reality in a system that is overcrowded. We could call it underfunded if you want, but I like money doesn't solve this problem. No, right? Money doesn't solve this. This is a human issue. This isn't a money problem.
It is, and it's a socioeconomic issue. It's poverty. There was no rich guys in prison.
Right. Not where you were.
Not where I was. There was no rich guys. You know what I mean? And we had 15 guys from the same housing project, notorious housing project here in Norfolk, in my pod. And I'm like, they grew up together. And I'm like, and they accept the fact that they're in prison. It's no big deal. And it's not getting better. There's no correction inside the facilities I was in.
Yeah, that's where I was going with this.
You're going to get worse. You're going to get worse. There was a guy who, first time he ever did heroin was in prison. He goes, that's where my love affair with heroin started, right here. And he hasn't been the same since.
Yeah, so that's a couple questions, just kind of moving on that. And that would be, what is a guy like you seeing all this stuff, right? What is a guy like you doing to avoid, steer clear of it, still having to... I guess the term I would say is operate and live in this environment. Yeah. What do you do? How do you stay out of all of this stuff, man, and make it through to the other side? Because people do. You're an example of that. How do you do it?
I tell you, and I met a group of like I said, everything's race in prison, white boys, very in shape guys. They hung out together. One of the guys, Wayne, he kind of brought me under his wing and taught me how to move in prison, because you don't know how to move in prison if you've never been to prison. And anybody who's been in prison will go, yeah, he's telling the truth. What you think is right isn't right. What is wrong is right. You don't know how to move. And I certainly did not. And these guys were all, religion in prison were also true guys. Odinism and, the Viking religions, which was approved by Department of Corrections. So I fell in with those guys. Okay. And if it wasn't for some of the things they told me, I don't know, like going out to rec. Like, okay, in the rec yard, over here's the Bloods, over here's Crips. That's DMI. Stay away from this group. If you have a problem, we have a guy who, every group has a big homie on the yard. And that person, if you have an issue with a group, will go over there and, parlay, make an agreement that, hey, dude, let's not get this out of control. And we had a guy in our group who did that. And he was very well spoken. He was a tough guy. And I kind of fell in with those guys. And they lived on, morals and values. And I like that. Simple stuff. Like, this is one time where I really had to check myself and go, okay, don't fall into this life too much. 3 gangbangers came into our pod who weren't from our pod. So there's a charge right there. You're not allowed to do that. Okay. And they jumped one guy. And it was right out in the middle of the pod. So there's one guy fighting 3 guys. And I'm like, why am I watching this? Like, I would never let somebody get jumped like this if in my neighborhood or in a bar, I'm like, hey, dude, one-on-one. And I wanted to get involved. And I was telling my buddy Wayne about it. He's like, don't ever get involved. He goes, because you don't know what's going on. And I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, well, come to find out, that was a street beef with the Bloods out on the street that carried over to the prison. He was like, you don't get involved in anything, no matter what you think. And I'm thinking it's barbaric. And I'm like, I'm standing around watching. I'm like, the fuck has happened to me? I mean, why am I watching this guy get just beat by 3 guys and I'm standing here? Like, we shouldn't do that as human beings.
It's not in you. Yeah, I get you. You're wrestling. I hear what you're saying there. You're wrestling internally with who you are,
right,
and what you know to be right, without maybe a full understanding of the social environment or having any clue about the social literacy that you need to onboard in order to survive and navigate this whole thing. That makes sense to me, man. I think I get that.
And here's another situation. I was in 340 in a top bunk, and a bottom bunk came open, and they moved me. It's called a bed move. I got moved to the bottom bed, but the whole section were Bloods. I'm the lone white boy sleeping, and this is an open pod. I mean, 2 foot to my right is the big homie. The big homies are like the shot caller for their group.
Okay.
And he was the big homie. And one of the white guys took me aside and was like, hey, man, they don't want you there. I heard them talking already that you're not welcome and they're not going to live by you. I'm like, fuck.
So how do you correct this?
Well,
how do you figure this out?
Yeah. So I went and talked to Wayne, and he was like, go talk to the big homie and tell him what you've heard and see what the issue is. And, some people are like, I would never do that. So I go over to their cut. He's on the other side of the pod, and there's a cut. It's about 2 feet in between bunks, and they're bunk beds. And, I knock on the cut, very respectful. I'm like, hey, I don't want to use their names. Hey, you guys got a minute? They're like, C, everybody called me C in prison. What's going on? I'm like, well, I heard through the grapevine, the white boys told me that I'm not welcome in that bunk. I didn't ask to move there. What can we do? What is going to happen? Because I don't want to live like this. And they're like, who said it? I go, well, you guys know you just beat him up the other night. He goes, no, you're good, C? He's fucking not. He was like, you're more than welcome to sleep there. He goes, matter of fact, the phones in prison are controlled by gangs. The 2 phones on the right are Blood phones. The next phone's a Crip phone. Don't fuck with them. You know what I mean? Like, don't get on you can't just go and pick that phone up. You'll get jumped. He was like, anytime you need the phones, you come and let us know and we'll put you on. He was like, we respect the fact that you came and spoke to us like a man. I'm like, whew. Like I didn't know if I was going to get jumped, but you can't live next to a bunch of guys that's going to kill you.
Right.
What are you going to do? You're either going to lay there and cower and go, okay, I'm going to get stabbed in my sleep. I'm going to get hot water thrown on my face, which I saw while somebody's sleeping. Like but they were very cool, man. And they respected the fact that I approached them as men in their cut. It's like, hey,
that's interesting. The whole concept of respect.
Yes.
And it obviously is what we're talking about here. And the respect will, generally speaking, I think respect's respect, right?
And it wasn't because I was a tough guy. I'm not claiming to be a tough guy, but, think about you being in a section of the pod. You're the only white guy and everybody around you are Bloods. And you hear they don't want you there.
Imagine.
Now what?
Yeah. Again, I think people think they know who they are until they get in those into situations. And when I say those, I don't mean that. I have zero experience with that, but I've been in certain situations like, I thought something about myself, and that just proved that I have no idea about anything. I don't know shit about fuck, as they say, kind of thing.
But you can't go and talk to the correction officers about it because that's called checking in.
Yeah.
Like as soon as you say you're in danger, they're going to move you out of the pod. Okay, you checked in. Now you're going to get fucked up for real.
Now your whole situation changes like at a whole different level.
Yeah.
That I've heard before as well. So it's like, it's navigating the social caste and social system.
And I had no idea how to do it.
Yeah. And I think what I heard you say there, without saying these exact words, is you are going to have to choose a team. You're going to have to choose a team. Going in and expecting that you're going to do this all on your own is false thinking.
No matter how tough you think you are, And, I'm somewhat, I consider myself well-rounded. I'm a good fighter. You're not ready for this.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, you're not, it's just, you better find somebody. And luckily I fell in with a good group of guys who, the guy Wayne has been locked up since he was 17.
Yeah.
26 years.
It's interesting, when I hear you talk too, because, I think about this and, people, again, they have already made up their mind kind of who they are, maybe how they'd handle themselves, what's right, what's wrong, right, in their world. And then they get into a world that isn't their world. And you're going to have to wrestle, I guess, with what I hear you saying is you have to really wrestle with what you think is right and wrong and survival.
Right.
And because you're not thriving there. This is not a place where you're going to figure out how to thrive. It really is about survival.
Consequences for everything you do in prison, from the way you walk to who you associate with. Like there was a chomo, they call him chomo, child molester in our pod. And he would come by and talk to me. I didn't know who the fuck he was. And somebody took me aside and was like, hey, Steve, you know that guy's a chomo, right? I'm like, I had no idea. So next time he came around me, I'm like, hey, dude, get the fuck away from me.
Right.
Just get away from me.
It's black and white, right?
Yeah. I can't be associated with you because then everybody thinks that I approve of what you did. And chomos are extorted, beat nonstop in prison. That's the way. So I'm not going to be around that. Get the fuck away from me.
Yeah. I'll just say this, like, good. They should be.
I agree. I had no sympathy for
man, I mean, again, just going back to your story and kind of where this whole thing started and kind of where we're at now, and you're having to get through this. This is a year and a half of you having to navigate these types of situations, not sometimes, but all the time, kind of on the daily. And you mentioned kind of how you did that, right? Or not kind of, you detailed how you did that in certain situations that are very real. And that's why I wanted you to share those, because you can't be nuanced about this or vague about it. I think you have to be really upfront for people to really get the message. And again, my desire to have you tell those stories is not to sensationalize them, but for me is to hear the reality, because, I've heard people that have spent time in prison say, hey, a lot of what you actually see in the movies these days is not, or, in cinema is not too far from reality in a lot of cases.
Right.
But it's still cinema. It's still a made up story.
Yeah,
and people are generally not given a platform to talk about the realities of what's going on in these situations in a way that I think allows them to actually tell the stories versus it being chopped up and dissected and then put back together in a way that makes for good TV or whatever the case.
And, it's thanks to you for giving me a platform. And I'm hoping, like my career, I was successful before I went to prison. I've been in the agency, working with the agency for 17, 18 years. And I'm hoping that lends some type of credibility that, I'm not a career criminal. I'm not up here, bitching and moaning about stuff, but the environment is so toxic inside these prisons. Very few people get better in prison. I'll tell you that.
I don't know how they could. I don't know how they could. I mean, obviously everybody has to take personal responsibility for themselves and the things that they do, like you did, right? And you can choose to do drugs or not do drugs and be in some cases, maybe those choices are much different. They're put in front of you in a much different way in terms of being in a gang, committing some type of a violent act as a means for survival or whatever. I'm not even going to pretend to know I know anything about that, because I know I do not. But the point of that is I don't know how in that situation, if you didn't have a very strong foundation going in at any level whatsoever, you're going to get any better. The name of the game is survival. Let me just get through this, and every day is going to present me a different challenge, and I'm going to have choices I need to make, and I'm just going to do the best I can with what I have. And if you're not good at that already, if you are already a poor judgment, right, or already have done things outside that will follow you into a situation like this, as you were mentioning, this was a beef that happened on the street, and now you're paying the piper for whatever happened out there. Yeah. If maybe, I guess, because you're one of those people at this point, if you've not done all that kind of stuff and you get into this situation and you can navigate, then you could come out okay, but you're not better, right? No. Like, I mean, I guess you could say because what would you be better for? Like, okay, now you understand it, you can tell the story. There may be some positive that we can take away from this, but Did you need to get better, Carl?
Yeah,
was there something that you went to prison for that you need to get better for?
I don't know, man. I tell this to my parents, I'll take it to my grave that I didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. And you brought up, if you're a drug addict, when you go to prison, you're not getting better. There's losing. Drugs everywhere. I mean, you're losing. Yeah. You're going to be happy. I've had many guys tell me, hey, I'm a drug addict. And if I'm going to be a drug addict, I'd rather be in jail than out on the streets.
But you also told me that if you're not suffering, but if you're on medication for other things, that you've needed in order to do the things that you need to do and function the way you need to function when you go there, those are going to be taken away from you. Maybe not forever, but at least for a period of time. And what happens during that time and the exposures that you have there, how could that play into getting addicted to another to some other type of? I
completely see it happening, man, without a doubt, because it's there. And it was just my reoccurring flashback. I had a teammate of mine who was shot in the head, right, in Afghanistan, and it went through his helmet, blew in through here, went around and blew out the back. And me and another guy, American advisor, we'll call him, we carried him up a mountain and to get him out of there, right? And that's part of the stuff Kyle was telling you about. And every once in a while, the guy would come forward and, his head was just mangled. And I'd look in his eyes and his eyes were all black. And I'm like, okay, I'm watching him die. Like, this man is not going to make it. And when they would start banging those bars, man, that picture of this guy would just flash in my head nonstop. And I'm not a big boo-hoo PTSD guy. My God, I shot my gun in combat. That's what I want to do. But I didn't know what my brain had in store for me. The
impacts.
With these things. And, I was off my medications. It was bizarre, man. So, something needs to be taken into real consideration when guys come in to have an issue, instead of saying, hey, you're the dumbass that joined the military. That's not the way to go about it. And and here's another thing. I get everything in prison's a con. Everything. I heard this saying.
There's always an angle or somebody's trying to work one, right?
Yeah. Free men see curves, convicts see angles. Everything's an angle. It don't matter if you go to church. It don't matter if you volunteer for the chow hall. If you're the pod mentor, you're doing it for a reason. And I get that there are people in prison that belong in prison.
Yeah,
I do. But I don't have an answer on how to improve, or there's got to be a better way, man. And I don't know it. I don't know it.
I know that I don't know. I definitely know that I don't know. And I don't think there's a lot of answers here. And if we're looking to, legislation, right, politicians, things like that to make decisions for us that I'm sure they don't know either. And I don't mean that because they can't comprehend it, right, but because they think they know, and they're making decisions based on those things versus the realities, and with zero consequence to the decisions that they make, and how things get handled. I know that's not the answer. I know that for sure. Because what you're describing is a result of all of that. However, I do think that staying the course with telling the story and making people aware of it, and I think the nice guys don't win in that situation. Right. Smart guys can do better, right? Good people can get through this like you have, but man, there has to be a lot of other stuff downloaded in order to make that happen. And you've kind of described that and touched on a lot of things. I mean, the part that the interesting thing about this is you're telling this only a couple weeks after getting out of that situation.
I just got out 2 Fridays ago.
Yeah. So when we're recording this, we're literally 2 weeks out of being out. Maybe just as we're kind of getting towards the end here, just kind of talking about what that transition has been like for you, getting out, because you've had experience of transitions in your life before. You've talked about several of them. Obviously, going into the military, getting out, going to Blackwater, getting out, going into the agency, getting out, or being forced out. Obviously, going through an incident, moving through the different stages of that. I mean, it's all about these transition periods and how they're handled. I wonder how this is going for you, man. What can you tell us? I mean, because the first time I talked to you, I mean, when you look at the percentage of days that have happened or the number of days that have happened since you've been out, it's not very many. And I'm sure just like, before, every day is like a new adventure and you're discovering new things, new challenges, also good things that maybe you missed. And have been positive for you. What can you tell us, dude?
Not to be dramatic, but I will never fully recover from this. My life has been upended. Prison, the toll it took on my family was tremendous. Getting out is, right now it's almost surreal. Now a year and a half of not paying bills, not having an income, everything is in default. Everything's
still
in
there. Yeah, that didn't go away.
No. I mean, who would have known you could go a year and a half without paying your bills, right? But I mean, credit cards are out. Accounts have been closed, so I'm dealing with all that. There's nothing that will get me back into prison. It won't happen. I mean, like, I hate to say I'll walk away from a situation. I mean, I'm convinced I would have been killed. I will say this, man, be very, and I see a bunch of stuff on the internet about, concealed carry and classes and what to expect. You want to know what to expect? Talk to somebody that's gone to prison because of that. And I made the decision to shoot. I'm not pawning that off or anything like that. And I thought I was completely justified. But you really need to take a look at, are you carrying that gun just to carry it? You know what I mean? Or are you prepared to use it? And if you're prepared to use it, don't think that you're going to be judged by a jury of your peers. You're not. So it's a lot to take, man. And I hope people really, really, take it to heart what I have to say here, and not trying to be sensational, dramatic, but man, there's consequences.
Yeah, you've outlined those pretty clearly. I think about like what somebody would be thinking. Well, that's why there's nothing from a training perspective here that you do differently, right? Was that's not a problem. It's not your de-escalation skills of, I'm trying to get the hell out of here. Like, okay, got it, bro. I'm going back to my bike. I'm going to get on. I'm going to ride away kind of thing. So that's not it. It's not hard skills. It's not soft skills to get you out of here. It's not having some insurance policy from some fucking organization that says they're going to take care of you when this happens. I did not know this actually, man. I had a guy on the show who is an instructor, former law enforcement officer, or current law enforcement officer, still actually, who told me that he recommends a specific company. I can't remember which one it is. I'm not going to try and guess it right now. But there's actually only one company that has successfully defended a self-defense firearms case all the way through the civil end of things for a person. Like, there's only one. So with all the insurance that you're hiding behind this guise of protection or I'll be okay, think about that for a second. Think about that for a second, because there's a lot of things that stand in the way of you actually being a free person after having to maybe use your firearm for a self-defense situation, even if things seem completely right or across the board. And obviously every state handles themselves differently in terms of how they look at things or whatnot, but so does every judge. So does every juror, right? So does every attorney. So does every witness. So does every law enforcement officer. So does every asocial predator or person that's committing some type of an act or whatever. Everybody has their own way of doing things. You don't have any protection that protects you from any of that stuff. It may be helpful in some of the things, like paying a bill to an attorney, but beyond that, your life's going to be turned upside down. Absolutely. And even if, I just look at this and I hate to say this, but even if you had gone to trial and come out the other side and not had gone to prison, like, what would have happened? Because even if you'd been found not guilty, does the agency take you back? I think not.
Probably not. Right?
You'd already been doxxed. Your family had already been doxxed. You're already financially being crushed. You still owe these attorney fees, right? You're still like this now. This in your community, you've been all over the news and whatever else. Like, does that mean you even if you'd been found not guilty, you're probably still trimming trees, slinging concrete, all that stuff,
you're
right?
In the eyes of the public, man. That's just that's the way it goes, and so.
Yeah. I just think about the story. I mean, I don't really know. I'll be processing this for quite some time. I don't want to say, I'll say it this way. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you just kind of bringing the realities of your personal story to the table. I think people get far too lost in the outcome driven, things that they think might happen, that they see, hear about, or imagine. I think they hear a story and they try to fill in the gaps of why that's okay or why that's not okay or whatever else. But the reality of it is you can do that all day long. But what you just told was the reality. This is the reality, and that's scary. That is scary, particularly living in the place that we live right now. As disconnected as I think people are for caring for other human beings and how willing they are to hurt somebody else or threaten somebody else, even if whatever that guy did originally that worked for him 100 times. In this case, it didn't, and there were consequences to that on every side. And hopefully, it gets people to think a little bit deeper, more, and then from there, taking it to the next level and going, look, man, here's a dude who seemingly did all the right things, who wound up in this situation, and this is what he was faced with. This is where my tax dollars are going, and this is how the politicians are dealing with things. In this state, they're letting people out of prison. Those same people that do drugs, that commit violent acts, right, that are part of the corruption, they're letting them out of prison because they're too full, or like we've reduced the criminality of what that particular charge is. So they're going back and they're rehearing people's trials and they're letting them out on the street. These people are out on the street. The people that you just described on the inside, what's the thing that changes them from being that way on the inside to then not being that way on the outside? I think you just described, like in most cases, nothing. It's totally normal for them to be on the inside. Like it's almost expected.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. And you hear guys say when they get out, like, I know I'm not going out to do the right thing. I know what I'm going to do. I've heard guys plotting their next crime spree when they get out, and I'm like, man, I guess as a nation or just as human beings, we got to do better. I mean, there's got to be some. I don't have the answer, brother. You know what I mean? But got to be something.
I think that's a great place to leave it. You're right. We got to do better. And I think it starts with the individual looking internally to figure out how they do that. And so if you're the guy that's carrying the gun, sticking the gun in your pants every day, going outside, think about that. That could be the first part of doing better. I want to think about that a little harder. And what's the real, are you really in a position to be doing that right now? Like, is that really where you want to be? If you're a person that's like, I don't have anything to do with that. This, you guys create your own problems, and this is, this is a problem that he created for himself and whatever else. That's fine. But this isn't the only type of problem. There are other people in prison that did not have a quote unquote fair trial by a jury or their peers and are sitting behind bars that shouldn't be there, that are faced with the same types of things that you're faced with. And until it happens or it hits home and it falls in your lap, you probably won't care. It's that dirty little thing the society expects somebody else is going to take care of and doesn't ever think about it until it falls in your lap. You could do better. You could read into this a little bit. You could listen to this story and think a little bit differently about the realities that exist, because this could be your kid, could be your uncle, could be your dad, right? Or whatever.
I realize too, everything I say can be denied by the corrections. Sure. Yeah. Sure. Oh no, we have this policy, we have this and that. I'm just speaking from my experience as an individual. And, even I'm, some of your viewers may go, hey, the hell with that guy, he did what he did, blah, blah, blah.
Maybe.
Yeah, I don't deny that. The purpose is to let you know what goes on inside prisons. And I don't think majority of America is ready for that.
You're right. I agree 100% with that statement. I don't think they're ready for that. I think that's why we don't hear about it more. And I am, like I said, just in wrapping this up, man, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you being, I don't know if this is the right word. It might sound weird to you, but I think it's very brave of you to talk about it, right? Because, you know, I think it shows a lot of intestinal fortitude to be able to come to the table, especially so soon after, you know, your experiences and you're right in the middle of the next step in your journey here, to be able to just get that out there. I hope it's helpful for you in some way too, man. Like just kind of getting it out there, knowing that you got some stuff off your chest. I know you have a pretty solid network of people to support you. And I know they've supported you to do this as well. And I think that's super important. And if that's what people take away from this, somebody else that's been in the same situation, that helps them come forward to tell somebody, not necessarily on a podcast or a TV show or whatever else, but talk to somebody that helps them stay out of this situation or prepare better for it as a family member of somebody that might be going forward. That's the whole point, man. That's the whole point. So thanks, thanks Kyle for doing it.
Yeah, man. Hey, thank you for the platform too, man. If I can help anybody out, you know, I will do it. They can reach out to me. I have no issue with it, man. And, you know, I'm humbled that you had me on your show. So I really appreciate it.
Well, like I said, you come highly recommended. I'm humbled that you came on, like I said, and doing what you did today. I hope the listeners are able to take this away and think maybe a little bit deeper about some of the things that they haven't thought as deeply about, and it provides some value, man. So listen, just leave it with this. If there's anything that I can do to help you out, right, along the way, connect you with people, put you in the room with somebody or whatever else, I'm here to do that. Certainly the least I could do for, you know, the time that you've given me and the energy that you've given me today. And man, I guess, you know, without, you know, I don't know if I can say it any better, but man, I just wish you the best of luck. Like it
means a lot, man. It really does. It means a lot.
Yeah, just the best wishes in trying to get your feet back underneath you in a different kind of way, and move this train down the rails there, because you made it this far, man. You got a lot of life left in you. There's skills in there, like you just displayed quite a few of them in terms of your ability to communicate and articulate, and somehow I feel like that's going to come up for you more in the future. At least that's you're the type of dude that needs to be having those conversations with people. Maybe it's young people, maybe it's people that are inside the system. I don't know, man. Whatever it is, I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you, sir. And thank you very much for everything, and stay in contact.
Will do.
All right, brother. Thank you.